You're studying for exams, so why do your notes look like a textbook? If you're watching this, there's a very good chance you've spent years taking notes, pages of notes, folders of notes, thousands of words of notes, and yet completely backwards. Because if you're taking notes the way they taught you in school, by copying and pasting off the board, highlighting and rewriting word for word from your textbook, I promise you, you are working so much harder than you need to and getting much less back than you deserve. So, I'm going to show you how most students have been taking notes completely backwards, the science behind it, what your brain has actually been begging you to do instead, and the note-taking system that will feel like you're cheating because of how well it prepares you for exams. Let me describe your note-taking process back to you. You're in class or sitting somewhere with your textbook beside you. The teacher says something, you write it down. A slide appears on the board, you write it down. The textbook opens to page 144. You write it down. It feels productive, right? But that's the illusion that's keeping students in the cycle. You are not learning. You are transcribing. And before you crash out at me, I thought note-taking worked like that too. The only problem is, examiners don't mark notes. They mark answers, and answers come from retrieval, your ability to pull out what you've learned from memory when it's time to use it. So when you copy and paste notes directly, word for word, you train your brain to be passive, and passivity creates familiarity. Understanding is knowing that person's name, their story, and why they matter. And familiarity in an exam looks like, wait, I've seen this before. I studied it. I literally wrote it down, so why can't I remember it? Sound familiar? In 2014, researchers Pam Muller from Princeton and Daniel Oppenheimer from UCLA published one of the most important studies on learning that most students have never heard of. They split students into two groups. One group took notes by hand, the other took notes on laptops, and what they found should change everything about how you study. The students taking notes on laptops wrote significantly more, but their notes had far more verbatim overlap with the lecture. Basically, they were copying almost word for word. Now, the students who took notes by hand performed significantly better on conceptual questions, not because they wrote more, but because they wrote less and more deliberately in their own words. They processed what to write, which forced their brains to actually engage with the material they were studying. The researchers called what the laptop students were doing mindless transcription, and the finding was clear. The tendency to transcribe lectures verbatim rather than processing information and reframing it in your own words is actively detrimental to learning. So every time you've copied a slide, every time you've written down what the teacher said word for word, every time you've rewritten your textbook into a prettier version of itself, your brain was barely involved, and your exam results have been paying the price for it. I asked you a question at the beginning of this video. I said, you're studying for an exam. So why do your notes look like a textbook? You might say, oh, because the information I need to learn is in the textbook. Exactly. The information is already written for you. How traditional notes look and how exams work completely contradict each other. Traditional notes look like topic, information, more information, more information. An exam works like question, retrieval, answer. Completely different structure. So the way you study should be preparing you for how exams work. And how do you do that? It's actually so simple, it's going to make you a bit annoyed that nobody told you sooner. You ready? Ask a question. That's it. That's the fundamental change. When information comes in, your job is not to record it. Your job is to interrogate it, to turn it into a question that forces your brain to retrieve and reconstruct the answer. So, get a blank sheet of paper, and instead of writing, photosynthesis is the process, no. Write, what is photosynthesis? Instead of, the Truman Doctrine was designed to, write, what was the primary goal of the Truman Doctrine? Then you close your notes and explain. That gap between the question and the answer, that's where learning lives. Because when you copy notes, your brain is in passive receiving mode. Information goes in, but it doesn't go deep. It sits on the surface. But when you turn that same information into a question and then answer it, your brain has to do something. It has to search, it has to connect, it has to build. And that building process, that's learning. Researchers call this the testing effect or retrieval practice, and it is one of the most consistently proven study techniques in all of cognitive science. Students who regularly retrieve information through questioning outperform students who passively review notes, not by a little, by a significant, measurable, and reproducible margin. Now that you understand why question-based notes work, let me show you how to build on them with the method that will change your grades. Because as powerful as question-based notes are, on their own, they're still missing something critical. Because exams don't ask, tell me everything you know. They ask, define, explain, compare, discuss, analyze, evaluate. Just remembering information isn't enough. You need to know how the examiner wants that information structured, because every exam you will ever write in your academic life is built on the same framework. Keyword plus mark allocation. And keywords are never random. Examiners are literally using a system to test how you think. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me show you. When the question says explain, the examiner isn't asking you to yap about everything you know. They're asking, can you show a clear cause and effect? Describe is asking for observable features, characteristics, what something looks like or consists of. Evaluate is asking you for your judgment and reasoning. A balanced argument that comes to a conclusion, not a list, not a summary, a structured judgment. Do you see the difference? If you do, comment. Seriously, I read every one. The keyword tells you what kind of thinking earns 2 marks, 4 marks, 6 marks, etc. Because each keyword is an instruction, a precise one. And when you know what each instruction is actually asking for, you stop guessing, you stop yapping, you start writing exactly what the examiner is looking to tick. This is the note craft method. It breaks down how to take notes that mirror an exam. The keywords examiners use, what they're actually asking for, how to make sure you're hitting the mark scheme every single time, and how to structure your answers so you're not losing marks unnecessarily. Because examiners are not testing what you write in your notes. They're testing how well you think. And if your notes can mirror how examiners want you to think, they become a cheat code. I created this system because almost everything that students have been taught about studying never explains how your brain learns, how you've been working against it for years, and exactly what is proven to work. And I never want to see another frustrated student with potential like I was believe they just weren't smart enough. So, if you want this method and see what your brain is truly capable of, the link is in the description. You were never a bad student. You were a student who was handed a highlighter, told to write your notes, and expected to figure out the rest. Nobody showed you that when your brain knows what to do, what you become capable of doing completely changes. Now you know. So stop taking notes to store information and start taking notes to answer questions. And go out there and show yourself what you're truly capable of. I'm rooting for you.